welcome to my channel. Today's recipe, we're making marinara sauce. Now this was requested by one of my viewers, Beverly Perez. Thank you, Beverly, for asking me to make this. Happy to do it. And also I want to mention that this recipe is inspired by my father-in-law, who's Italian, by the way, and he knows how to make a really wonderful sauce. So I think you're going to like this. It almost tastes like it has meat in it, but I assure you there is none in this recipe. It's totally vegetarian. So I'm Rockin' Robin, and I'm going to show you how to do it right after this. I know you're dying to see what's in this, so let's get started. First up, we have our tomatoes. Now I'm using canned Italian tomatoes here. I got these at just your local supermarket should carry them. These are San Marzano tomatoes that are whole and peeled. We'll need some mushrooms. Now this is where I think the secret to this sauce is in these mushrooms. These are porcini, they're dried mushrooms. And I'm gonna show you how to rehydrate them and work them into our sauce for just amazing flavor, guys. It's really great. We'll need a yellow onion. Now I use the super fine dice here, guys, and I'll have a video for you if you wanna know how to do that. We'll need some minced garlic. Now everything else is pretty much fresh here. I'm using fresh rosemary, basil, parsley. I'm going to be using some leaves of the celery, sage, oregano, thyme. We'll need a little salt, olive oil, and a little bit of wine. Now this is optional. If you don't want to put it in, I know some of you will ask me, you don't have to add it. It'll still be delicious, but it just adds a nice little dimension of flavor. And then I'm using a Cabernet here, just something I had at the house, and it's just a splash. So to start off our recipe, the first thing we're going to do is I have a bowl of just cold water right here out of the tap from the sink, and I'll take my mushrooms and place it in them. And what we want to do here is just rinse these to remove any sand or dirt that might be remaining in them. We don't want that in our sauce. So we'll just do this for about 3 or 4 minutes. So once we swish these around, the sand or the dirt, if there's any in there, should sink to the bottom. And then we'll just take these out, and I'm going to place them in another bowl. And now we're going to fill this bowl with some hot water. So we're going to let our mushrooms soak for about 10 minutes in the hot water, and in the meantime we'll start cooking our onions and garlic. Our next order of business is to start working on our onions. We're going to cook these in olive oil. We'll put a couple of tablespoons in our pan. And I'm going to start my heat on medium, and then I'm going to lower it down to low because I want to cook these low and slow. It's going to take about 20 minutes minimum to 30 minutes. So take your time with these. It really adds a lot of flavor to our sauce. So a lot of recipes call for doing this for like anywhere from 2 to maybe 7 minutes. And I really think you're missing out. And then we won't be adding our garlic until the end, the last minute or so of cooking these. So now we're going to head over to the counter and start preparing all of those herbs you saw earlier. Now we're going to work on the celery. So I want to show you, and before I mention that, I want to mention you want to bounce back over there to the onions that are sauteing every 2 to 3 minutes so that they don't, overcook on, let's say, one surface area. So you want to keep turning them over and they'll caramelize nice and slow. All right, so on the celery, we're just going to take the very center, the hearts of the celery. And everything's going to be going, at this point, the tomatoes and all the herbs are going to go into a food processor to break it down so that it's a nice, smooth sauce. All right, so I've got my leaves here. I'm going to take off a little bit of the stem. I don't want too much celery, but I want all those leaves. They have the really nice flavor. We're going to take this section here, and this is what's going in the food processor. So next up is our thyme. I'm just going to peel. With the thyme, you can kind of peel the leaves off to kind of minimize the stem. So I'm going to peel off stuff like that. And how much? Boy, it's hard to measure, guys, but it's kind of an estimate. I mean, I'm going to go for just a few, a little pile. I'll show you. Here's our sage, and these are easy to peel. You've got pick off. The leaves are big. So I'm going to shoot for about a tablespoon. Now's the fresh oregano's turn. Now the leaves are bigger on this, and I like to use a little bit less oregano. It's a little bit strong for me, so I'll cut back to maybe a couple teaspoons. Next up is the rosemary from my garden, and you just peel the leaves right off. You don't want to use the stems in this at all, so just peel it off like that. And it's a very powerful herb as well, so I'm going to use less of this. And I'm going to chop it up by hand here before I put it in the food processor. I want to make sure that all of the little petals get, chopped up really nice and fine. All right, I'm just going to chop that up. So here's what our proportions look like. I've got my celery hearts here in the leaves, and this is the thyme. You can kind of see it's about a tablespoon, and the sage, and then the oregano is a little less, and then the rosemary is a little less still. Here's our onions after, well, I actually went about 40 minutes, which I like to go longer if I can. And you can see they're more of a golden brown, sort of. But now I'm going to add the garlic. And we're just going to cook this. I want to kind of mellow out that flavor for about a minute or two. And my temperature is still on low. So I just want to work that in so it touches the heat. And then once this is done, I will just turn off the heat so we can finish the rest of our sauce. Now it's time for the mushrooms. So I'm going to take them out of the liquid, and I'm going to chop them up. Even though I'm going to put them in the food processor, I'm going to chop them up a little bit by hand just because I want to make sure that they really get, chopped up super fine. Now we're going to put the tomatoes carefully into the food processor, and I'll probably have to do this in batches because I'll have too much. Toss in the thyme and the sage and the oregano. Let's give that a whirl. Add some more. Now the only thing I'm not putting in here as far as the herbs goes is the basil. I'm going to do that last. I'm going to chiffonade it and do that separate. And then I'll toss in the mushrooms. All right, so this is what this batch looks like. Look at that, it's beautiful. Now I'm going to place this into the pan with the onions. So go ahead and do your second batch with the tomatoes. I still have to do the parsley and the rest of the mushrooms. So I'm going to let this simmer for about 30 minutes. And I'm going to add just that little bit of wine I told you about, maybe a quarter of a cup. And then I'm going to salt this to taste. So now we're going to chiffonade the basil. You do know what that is, right? Chiffonade? That's a French term to just a nice and easy way to cut up your basil. So you stack the leaves on top of each other, say about 8 to 10 of them, and then you roll them up into a cylinder. And this makes it really easy to cut. So we'll take all that basil and we'll just mix it right in. And then I'm going to simmer the sauce for another probably 10 more minutes. All right, everybody, the sauce is done. I simmered it on the stove for about 30 minutes, and that's really all it really needs. So, and always, test it for salt, make sure you have enough of that. So I'm just gonna serve a little bit up here. It looks so beautiful. Those porcini mushrooms really do make the difference. Now, what Italians like to do, because I am married to one and I kind of know what they do, after they're done eating their dish of pasta and they have some extra sauce sitting there, they like to take their French bread and kind of wipe up their plate, sop it up as they say, and take a bite. That sauce has a beautiful flavor, like I said, with those mushrooms. It really gives it that sort of earthy, meaty taste to it. You think maybe there might be some meat in there, but there's not. and all the fresh herbs. Fresh herbs make a huge difference. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. And also I want to do a little shout out to my father-in-law, Lawrence, if you're watching. I want to thank you so much for all your inspiration in my cooking. It really means a lot, so thank you. And for you guys, I hope you'll try this recipe. I think you're gonna love it. It's gonna be your most favorite marinara sauce. I'm almost positive. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You wanna see more recipes like this, and leave me a comment. Thanks for watching.